You fly 6,000 miles across the globe to take on the most sensitive diplomatic mission around the world, and especially now after October 7th. But why do all that, and why do it now?
It's a land that I fell in love with in 1973, never got over it. I just had to say, here am I, send me. Because this is the one thing that I felt that I really wanted to be a part of. There are more Americans living in Israel than living in Canada, the UK, Italy, France, anywhere else in the world.
As the ambassador, as you know, I'm sure as you learned, you're responsible for the security of those 700,000 people.
And I sure would hate to have to tell them, okay, all of you need to get out of the country because the Iranians have launched an attack on the state of Israel. You know, David, as we're talking, my screen is lit up several times during our conversation and said, be prepared for sirens to go off. There are incoming missiles. It's very likely that at some point in our conversation, if you see me or hear me say, David, I think that's a siren, I got to go, you will understand.
Ambassador Mike Huckabee, welcome to the One Jewish State podcast. It's really just a delight to have you, and thank you.
Well, delighted to be with you, David. I tell you what, you left some very tough shoes to fill as ambassador to Israel. I don't even pretend that I can do it, but I'm having the time of my life. It has been an extraordinary experience, and I've been amazed at how well I've been received in this position and loving every day of it. But it's a job with some very long days, that's for sure.
Well, you kind of answered my first question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. You know, you are the Huckabee family is maybe not quite up there with the Bushes. You know, you haven't created two presidents yet. I said, but it's a family dynasty. You were governor of Arkansas for about 11 years, right? And then
Yeah.
you ran for president in 2008. You won the first caucus, right? You won the Iowa caucus. You were the front runner for a while. I think he came in second, right, in delegates behind John McCain.
Right.
I think
I
you, by the way,
almost could have pulled it off. You know, if I'd have won South Carolina, the world may have changed. But I came in second, didn't win. There's no prize for second place in politics. You either win or you go home empty. It's kind of the way it works. But it was a great experience. I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world.
I think you would have won the presidency if you would have won South Carolina. But you know, obviously, we'll never know the answer to that. Um, you Your daughter is now the governor of Arkansas. She served incredibly well with me, you know, in Trump 45. She was an incredible press secretary, very kind to me, and now she's the governor of Arkansas. And then, you know, you left politics and you became a big deal on TV. You know, the Huckabee Show. You had a studio audience. They built, unlike this, you know, this podcast I'm doing out of my basement. You had a studio that they built for you. You had a live audience. You had a band. You know, and you gave all that up. And this is sort of where I'm heading. You know, you gave all that up at an age. You know, you and I are about the same age. We both have grandchildren. You know, you gave it all up at a time when, you know, people our age are kind of hanging out more with the family, you know, reconnecting with old friends. And what do? You fly 6,000 miles across the globe, you know, to take on the most sensitive diplomatic mission around the world, and especially now after October 7th. So you said it's a great job, but why do all that, and why do it now?
Well, for 52 years, I've been coming to Israel. My first trip was in 1973 between my high school graduation and freshman year of college. So for 52 years, I've watched this land transform into an incredible superpower of economy, of really innovation. But it's also a land that is constantly under threat. And it's a land that I fell in love with in 1973, never got over it, came here over 100 times in those years, brought tens of thousands of people. I wasn't looking for something to do. I was enjoying life in the private sector. I love doing television. I tell people it sure beat working. And it was fun. It paid well. It was a terrific experience. And if President Trump had asked me to do anything at all in the administration, whether it was to babysit a bureaucracy or anything else, I'd have said, no, thank you. I'm enjoying life. But when he called, and he never asked, as you know, David, he just calls and says, "You're going." And when he called, it was an Isaiah moment for me. I just had to say, "Here am I, send me." Because this is the one thing that I felt that I really wanted to be a part of, to expand the Abraham Accords that you helped launch, that really could reset and reconfigure all of the Middle East. And then, of course, because of the hostage situation in Gaza and because of the threat of Iran and the Houthis, I knew it was a challenge. And it was also one that if I would be able to be part of something that would help bring a greater level of security and peace to the people of Israel, and to advance the president's bold agenda, which is extraordinary. I mean, people, I don't think they fully get it, that he is a person who defies political gravity in a way no one else ever has. To be a part of that, it was simply impossible to say no to.
I I I know exactly what you're saying. Although, unlike you, I clamored for the job. I I called him up. I went to see him the morning after the election in 2016 to
Mm.
remind him, as if he needed to be reminded, that I had been clamoring for it. But look, you're absolutely right. When I what I saw, and it's much more, I think, relevant today, is just how much you can play a role, an important role, not just in the policies, because the policies, there's lots of people with their hands in the pot stirring the policies. You know, you and Secretary Rubio, obviously the president and others, but the the relationship between the countries. You know, the Israeli people right now, they're feeling so unloved
Yeah.
and so vulnerable. Their best friends are turning on them. Look, Canada, UK, France, Australia, they're all, you know, coming out with incredibly difficult policies. They're walking away from trade relationships. They're obviously not supporting Israel in the public square. They're condemning them. Um, America is really, you know, what Israel's got left, and it's of course their most important ally, and it's always been their most important ally. And I know you've only been there, you know, I don't know, has it been 6 weeks or 5 weeks, however long you've been there,
Yeah.
but I'm sure you get the fact that the your opportunity to just help people sleep at night, your opportunity to just convince the people of Israel that they have a friend, and you've done it magnificently, by the way. I've seen I've seen what you've come out with, magnificent stuff. Do you understand how much that resonates with the Israeli people? How important it is?
Well, it's coming out of my heart. And one of the things that I feel is an important role for me to play here is to communicate the relationship that America and Israel has. I don't think a lot of Americans fully understand it. Quite frankly, a lot of the Israelis don't understand it. I say that America has friends, it has allies, but it only has one partner, and that partner is Israel. And here's what I mean by the partnership. There are relationships we have with the UK and Canada and nations across the world, whether it's Japan, you know, in the Far East. We have lots of relationships, lots of alliances. But there is no relationship like the partnership that we have with Israel because what we share is at a level that is so granular. Our connections in the intelligence community is absolutely hand in glove. Same with the military, same with technology. There are ways in which the US and Israel partner over mutually important issues that most Israelis or Americans could never even imagine. It's hard to know when you've stopped talking to the CIA and you're talking instead to the Mossad because they're joined at the hip for the simple purpose that it is in both of our interests to be partners like this. And there have been a lot of rumors, David, of the past few weeks that maybe America and Israel are going through a divorce. Maybe the president doesn't love Israel anymore. One of my main jobs has been to say all these rumors of a divorce are nonsense. The president stands behind Israel. He's never wavered. No matter what you read in the press, it's fake news. And I even said to the World Jewish Congress a week or so ago, I said, let me tell you why this partnership is not going to go through a breakup. I said, it's like a marriage. Mine's lasted 51 years as of last weekend. And I said, there comes a point in the marriage when you just realize neither of you can afford to pay the alimony if you got a divorce. And I said, that's where America and Israel is. We're too deep into this for either of us to say we're done. So forget about that. That's not happening. And there is a very strong relationship between Israel and the United States that goes deeper than the two leaders of the president and the prime minister. It goes deep into the roots of all levels of government and, frankly, all levels of economic activity, military activity, and medical technology and agriculture. The partnerships are extraordinary. And you're one of the few people on earth that understand just how deep that is. But one of my jobs, I believe, as an ambassador, is to help communicate that on both sides of the Atlantic.
You know, the Secretary of Homeland Security under the first Trump administration came to visit when I was ambassador, and we sat and talked for a while. And he volunteered something which I thought was something always true, very rarely said, which is that Americans are safer at home because of America's relationship with Israel. And I
Yeah.
said to him, "Would you do me a favor? We're going to do something. Would you just say that publicly?" And he said, "With pleasure." I don't think Americans get that. I don't think they understand that it's a small world. It's a dangerous world. We have the same enemies. There's certain enemies that Israel has much better visibility into, much better eyesight on, and they share it completely. I mean, there's nothing. If there's an opportunity for Israel to save an American life, they will pursue that with the same vigor as if it were an Israeli life.
100%. And it's also important when Americans say, we do so much for Israel, as if they do nothing for us. And one of the things that I feel is an important message to America is look, there are ways that Israel is helping America. This is not a one-way street. We are gaining a lot. And I say to them, do you like your cell phone? Wouldn't have it without Israel. You ever had a cherry tomato or a seedless watermelon? Have you ever had that diagnostic test from the gastroenterologist when he had you swallow that little camera so that he could see down in your intestines? Thank Israel for that. The heart stent. Many medical procedures that have saved the lives of your relatives in the US wouldn't have saved their lives had they not been innovated and created in Israel and then moved to the United States where they could be scaled up for mass production and use. Israel, this tiny little country, has more Nobel Science Prize winners than any country on earth. And I think about how irrational that would be to think that a little country with 15 million people outshine the rest of the world when it comes to innovations and accomplishments in scientific discovery and innovation. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I think we both probably attribute the same reason, which is that it's God's will and God's showing His favor on the Jewish people, which we obviously desperately need. Here's my theory about all this noise about the alleged rift breakup, and I'm sure you've gotten a taste of this yet. It took me years to really fully understand it. It starts with a very interesting phenomenon people don't get. I was once with President Trump in a cabinet meeting, and all the secretaries went around the room and they all talked about what they were doing, and they were very complimentary to him. And afterwards, I said to him, "You know what it's like to be in an Israeli cabinet meeting, because the prime minister doesn't pick all his cabinet members. He picks, maybe a majority, but then to form a coalition, he's got to give, ministries to people that don't like him, that ran against him, that would love to see him gone. And so if you ran around the table, at an Israeli cabinet meeting, a third or more of the cabinet members would say, you should go, you're a lousy prime minister, we want nothing to do with you. So I said to the president, can you imagine running a government where more than a third of your ministers just don't like you? And from there, you have, unfortunately, a lot of leaks to the press. And then you have a press, which, not unlike the mainstream media in America, the press is very far left. And then they say, well, how can we undercut Netanyahu? What's his most important asset? And they say, well, probably his relationship with Donald Trump. So if we can, begin to throw cold water on that relationship, we're hurting him. And I think, because when I see articles in the U.S. news, the U.S. papers, about this, this pending divorce, it's all sourced from Israel, and it's all sourced from unnamed people in the Israeli press. And I think, we're starting an election year in Israel, and I think that's what most of this is about.
I think you're exactly right. I've told many people when they come to visit here, I'll tell them if you think the American press is really biased and bad, and they are, um, Israel's press is doing a real thorough job of trying to equal that. And I'm like you, I hate these stories that come from high government official, unnamed source, someone within the government. Because if anybody wants to talk to the press, I wish they would quit being a coward and they would simply man up and say, I'm on the record. I'm going to tell you who I am, what my position is, and you can check out whether what I say is true. I'm not going to hide like some kid in a under a bed, afraid to tell everybody who I am. And I have reporters here in Israel. They'll say, "Now I'll do an interview. We'll do it off the record." And I immediately stop them. I say, "No, no, no. I don't do off the record. I don't ever do an off the record interview. I never do deep background. If you interview me, I want it all recorded. We're going to record it too, because there is no such thing." I tell people there is one thing. The difference between on the record and off the record is 3 days. Sooner or later, everything you say off the record is going to be leaked out anyway. So I want to take ownership of it. If someone hears me say it, they're going to have my name and my face attached to it. I will own it. If it turns out I'm wrong, I'll at least be able to acknowledge it and apologize for it. But I'm not going to go around and whisper into some reporter's ear something that I don't have the guts to say to his or her face and to put my face on it. And I've often said, after years and years, 30 years plus of politics, I came to realize, David, that there are people that really aren't as high up in the government as they wish they were or thought they are. And they're the ones who like to leak because it gives them power. People who really have high positions, who are in that inner circle of trust, they would never betray that trust. So I say this: people who know don't talk, and people who talk don't know.
You know something? I wish I could show you. I have a little card here, with a couple of notes to make sure I covered these issues. It says right here, people who talk don't know, and people that know don't. It is one of the great truisms. I was going to ask you your reaction to it. In particular, by the way, just I was going to, kind of ask your reaction to that as it relates to Iran, because there is a massive amount of news on that. And obviously, it's one of those issues where, no responsible diplomat, no responsible public official would go off and start talking about, maybe we'll do this, maybe we'll do that. And yet, there is a limitless number of talking heads that will talk about what Israel can do, what they can't do, what America has told Israel it can't do, what the Gulf wants to do. That's the perfect example, I assume, for what you were saying.
Well, without a doubt, there are people on both sides of the Atlantic that want to pretend that they've had it all figured out. The truth is, President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu, they may not agree on everything. You know, David, you and I both have been married a long time to wonderful women. We're blessed to have our wives, and we have exceptional wives. But we still find times that we may not agree 100% on everything. And any relationship will have moments where there's not perfect agreement, but what there is the partnership that does not fade. And what I try to keep telling people is that President Trump is as strong and loyal a friend to Israel, well, actually stronger and more loyal than any president in American history, bar none. None have been as loyal as he has. And Prime Minister Netanyahu is a person who has great respect for the U.S. I've sat in his office sometimes at midnight. Um, and he will make very clear there are things we may wish to do, but we don't do things without making sure that our American partner is in agreement with us. I just think it's why the relationship continues to work so well.
The one of the ways that those who really hate Israel and want to destroy the U.S. relationship with Israel, the way they do it is these cartoons, these really ugly cartoons with Netanyahu kind of holding a leash, with Trump at the end of the leash saying, Netanyahu, sort of like the protocols of the elders of Zion, this, ancient anti-Semitic, allegations that somehow Israel is controlling America. And so from my perspective, when I see that, the president, goes out and does things that, things that are not consequential, obviously, but things that show that he has an absolutely independent America first, view towards the world. I think it's healthy. I think it's important. I think it's important for the president to show, look, I'm the American president. And where America and Israel have areas where they have to work together, we'll work together. But I'm not taking my cues from Bibi, nor should he. And I think, when he went off to the Gulf and didn't stop in Israel, I said, why should he stop in Israel? I mean, that was not the purpose of the meeting. And let's not
Yeah.
forget, who was the first political leader that he invited to the White House when he became the president? Prime Minister Netanyahu. So we tend to, some of us, of my faith, get very insecure. I think it's a mistake. I think it's a huge mistake. And then others, of course, just want to create, daylight, and that's how they do it. But I think you're absolutely right. I think I work with the president on this file for 4 years, and you'll work with him for 4 years, and I think you've already seen, and I certainly saw, his commitment to Israel's security, to their prosperity, to their longevity, is unlike anyone that has ever sat in the Oval Office.
There's no question about that. And when President Trump looks at Israel, he looks not only as a prime minister and says, I mean, as a president saying, look, Israel is our friend, but he also understands there are 700,000 Americans living in Israel. Here's the shocker for that. That's more Americans living overseas in a foreign country than any country other than Mexico. There are more Americans living in Israel than living in Canada, the UK, Italy, France, anywhere else in the world. So part of the reason the president really pays attention with Israel is because he has an entire congressional district number of people who live here. So anything that happens to Israel happens to a significant number of Americans.
And as the ambassador, as you know, I'm sure as you learned, you're responsible for the security of
Yeah.
those 700,000 people.
And I sure would hate to have to tell them, okay, all of you need to get out of the country because the Iranians have launched an attack on the state of Israel. It's one of the great responsibilities that we have at the embassy. It's one we take very seriously, that we think about, that we plan for, that we pray we never have to execute. But it's also a very serious embassy, as you well know, that this is not a ceremonial position here. I spend half my day in the skiff, the deep bunker that is so incredibly secure that a mosquito couldn't find his way in it. And that's where high level, highly sensitive information is shared. It's where we get internal and very intense briefings on what's happening in the world around us. All of those things are a part of what we live with every single day. So I tell people maybe in some embassies they're thinking about what hors d'oeuvres to serve next Tuesday at the reception. Here we're thinking about what happens when the sirens go off. Can we get everyone to shelter? Will everybody be okay? Will the defense systems intercept the missiles? And we go about our business. It's a different world.
Yep. You're not claustrophobic, are you?
No, thank goodness I'm not. Janet
Because
is, and she's not really one that loves the shelter experience, but we've had it now a number of times already. And it's, an ear piercing siren that goes off at whatever time of day or night. And then it means you got about 90 seconds to get below, grab our dogs, grab each other. But one thing, David, that I have so been amazed by and I respect, the resilience of the Israeli people is unbelievable. These are people who have to deal with this all the time. And they don't panic. They don't scream and yell and push each other down to get to the shelter. I was sitting in a restaurant in Tel Aviv about a year ago, and I was with a friend, and this was in the aftermath of October 7th, and I was here to do a television production. We were in Tel Aviv, and overhead, we literally saw a rocket intercepted the Iron Dome. I mean, we're watching it. The sirens go off. We go down, everyone in the restaurant, very orderly, goes down the steps. They get to the shelter. When it's cleared, everybody walks back up, very orderly. There's nobody screaming, nobody yelling, nobody pushing. Everyone sits back down and enjoys the rest of their meal, be it a little colder, but people finished their meal. They didn't rush to their cars and scream bloody murder that, oh my gosh, my world is coming apart. And I'm thinking, how many Americans could remain so calm and resilient in the face of that? It's not a world that we understand. And it's also something that you have to just look at the Israelis and say, my gosh, these people are tough. They have to be. They can't curl up in a fetal position and give up. And thank goodness they don't. And they're an example to the rest of the world of what it means to say, you can attack me, but you'll never get me to quit. And
Yeah,
that's Golda Meir said it best back in 1973. Somebody asked, what was the secret weapon of Israel? How come they won wars they shouldn't have won? And she said simply, because we have nowhere else to go.
yeah, absolutely. You know, we I, I've been in some of those meetings. I'm sure you've had at least probably weekly at this point, probably, where you kind of do a, I think they call it a sort of kind of a signals check. You know, that's like a State
Hmm.
Department word. To, you know, are the Americans okay? Do we have to change our wording to the Americans? And, you know, look, if this were in Lebanon or in Syria or in you know, or probably in 10, 20 other countries, America would be telling, you know, Israelis, you know, the rockets firing at you, you should get out. The one thing about that I remember that I was very impressed with, because, you know, all the security people would sit down and they say, they're probably safer in Israel than they are anywhere else. I mean, why would we tell them to go anywhere? I mean, Israel has this incredible defense system. And most importantly, the Israelis will protect the Americans. The Israelis are not going to ever leave the Americans to their own devices. And you know, that I assume that continues to be the point of view, because with notwithstanding all the attacks, including, you know, from the Iranians with, you know, one night, you know, 300 ballistic missiles were shot at Israel. At no point did the embassy ever say to the Americans, get out.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, speaks volumes about the confidence that America has in the Israeli system of self-defense and in their commitment to protect Americans.
Part of the reason that there's a safety here is because every home has a shelter. Every public building has a shelter. It's as standard to have a shelter as it is to have a kitchen or a bathroom. And that's out of necessity. Israel has learned that through the years. But the good news is that people are prepared, they take it seriously. I liken it because I have family members who say, are you safe? Are you okay? You know, we heard there was a siren, then whatever. I heard there was a missile that came in. And I said, calm down. I said, did you have a tornado warning last week? Probably. We have challenges, we have calamities that come toward us. But I also tell my family, look, I think I'm safe. I feel good about where I am. But if the worst thing could ever happen to me here, you know, the move next is a local move. I don't even have to have a long distance move. So I just look at it as God has been so good to let me live here, to be here in this particular post at this particular time in my life. And so be it.
Um,
That's what I've seen the same thing on my screen. And so it's possible
well,
that we may
why don't
get
you,
one here. Yeah.
well, you can mention it.
Okay. I'll just pick
Feel
it
free to
up then.
mention.
You know, David, as we're talking, my screen is lit up several times during our conversation and said, "Be prepared for sirens to go off. There are incoming missiles." It hasn't alerted our neighborhood where we are in Jerusalem yet, but it's very likely that at some point in our conversation, if you see me or hear me say, "David, I think that's a siren. I got to go," you will understand. But there are sirens going off in various parts of Israel right now, tonight, as you and I are having this conversation.
Yeah, it's listen. I was there on October 7th, 2003. I was in Jerusalem, my home there, and I had some grandchildren there with me who
Mm.
were visiting from America. A 12-year-old granddaughter looks me in the eye and says, uh, why do these people want to kill us? You know, they don't know us.
Mm.
They've never met us.
Wow.
They're shooting rockets at us. I mean, you know, when you bring someone in who is not, you know, numb to this process and they look at it, you realize how crazy it is that there are people that just want to kill
Yeah.
Jews. The more the better, and they have no idea who they're killing, and they don't know them. They have nothing against them personally. Never met
Yeah.
them. It's an upside down world. And stay safe, obviously. And if you have to break, you know, we'll find a way to continue. Let's try to get through some more things anyway
Okay.
before the Houthis or Hamas or whoever's after us goes forward. So let's talk a little bit about Judea and Samaria. It's something you know very well. When I when I got to the job in early 2017, no ambassador had ever been to Judea and Samaria for any reason. No Israeli ambassador. I had a Secretary of State who was very, very much against it, Rex Tillerson. Obviously, when Mike Pompeo came along, he's a friend of both of ours.
Yeah.
Things were different, but so sort of towards the end of my time, I began to expand um, my visits to lots of places in Judea and Samaria. You come in, and within a week, you're praying in Shiloh, and you're you know you're, no one's in doubt as to where you stand on all this stuff. But just give me the kind of the thought behind your commitment, not just to Judea and Samaria, but to actually as an ambassador to Israel to being there.
You cannot really embrace Israel and not embrace the most important biblical sites that have been the important biblical sites for over 3,000 years. You mentioned Shiloh. There's the place where the first tabernacle was. The Ark of the Covenant was housed there. It was the home of the Jewish faith for 369 years. It was where Hannah prayed her prayer over Samuel. And result of that prayer was the birth of Samuel that she dedicated to God. How do you not talk about Hebron, the tomb of the patriarchs, and so many places that people would say, well, that's in a forbidden area. Forbidden by whom? God tells us, that we should be able to enjoy the land. And so I don't have that mindset that I can't go places. And by the way, part of the reason that it's much easier doesn't mean that it's without its level of controversy. But in the latter part of the Trump administration, when Mike Pompeo became Secretary of State and you were ambassador, there was a pushback from the Trump administration that overturned this nonsense that said that it was illegal for Israelis to live in Judea and Samaria. That had been sort of a policy of the United States. And under President Trump's, in his first term, he reversed that and did not try to put this as some matter of breaking international law. And I think that's an important thing, maybe one of the more important things that President Trump did in his first term.
Well, Mike Pompeo and I worked on that for a year, and
Yeah.
you can ask David Milstein about it as well because he was there with me when I was working on it. And it took a lot of convincing, not just the lawyers in the State Department, but lawyers everywhere and political figures. And at the end of the day, they could not come up with a cogent legal argument why it was somehow illegal for the Jewish people to live within their biblical heartland. They couldn't do it. I mean, for lots of reasons. And so, yeah, I'm glad it's easier. But at the same time, during the Biden administration, there were two ambassadors to Israel. Neither one of them set foot over the Green Line. So it's not as if, it's not as if once we broke that ground, everybody followed us. And, to your great credit, you left no doubt when you arrived, where you stood on this issue. And I think you've done the world a great service. You've done the Jewish people, you've done people of faith everywhere a great service. And I think that, the next question I have for you is, so what do we do next? How do we build upon this? It's obviously it's not up to you entirely. There is, as we talked about earlier, there's a president, that we have a secretary of state, and lots of other people. But I think the more we normalize the Jewish presence in these locations, the more we're in a position to do something sensible, which is to jettison the two-state solution and start thinking about Israeli sovereignty in a way that accommodates the legitimate needs and wants and rights of the Palestinian people as well.
That's what a lot of people don't fully comprehend, David, is that nobody's saying that there isn't a position for the Palestinian people or there's no place for them in the world. None of that. But what most people don't understand is that there are Muslim Palestinian people who serve on the Israeli Supreme Court. It was a Palestinian, a Muslim, who was the judge that put a Jewish prime minister and a Jewish Israeli president, sentenced them to prison. And it didn't erupt into some total calamity in Israel. There are Muslims that are in the Knesset. There's a lot more that happens here than people understand. But there also must be a safe place for Jewish people to be able to come. They represent 0.2% of the world's population. Muslim countries have 644 times the amount of real estate in the world than Israel does. So this nonsense that Israel ought to condense its size, make its borders more narrow so its enemies can get even closer, and make it more uncomfortable for them and less safe for them. That's nonsense. I've never seen in the history of the world, and I've read a lot of history, but I've never seen it where a country wins a war and they're supposed to give up all the land that they won in the war. This is insane. So there can be peace, and I think your book, One State Solution, is One Jewish State, is very much really a practical guide to how this could work. But we don't need to pretend that you can take a Palestinian state run by particularly the Palestinian Authority, which is utterly corrupt, and just set them on top of the Jewish state and hope that everybody gets along and nobody gets upset with each other. And if people say, well, there needs to be a Palestinian state, well, we actually had one. It was called Gaza. And they had the place for 20 years. And in the 20 years they had it, they took what could have been Singapore and they turned it into Haiti. And what a shame and what a disaster. So there's got to be a better solution than that.
And there is, thankfully. And I think both you and I, you being an ordained Baptist minister, and me being the son of a rabbi, continue to be an observant Jew. People like to shrug off our thinking as oh, these are just a bunch of Bible thumpers who just who want to follow instructions that are 3,000 years old. Well, part of the answer is yes, we do. We do want to follow instructions that are they've lasted this long for a reason. But on top of that, you made a lot of points that have nothing to do with faith, which is that Israel has no margin of error. They
Yeah.
can't do this again. They gave Gaza to the Palestinians, and they almost suffered an existential threat. Judea and Samaria is even closer to the Israeli population centers. They just can't take that risk again. They fool me once, shame on me, shame on you. But this now becomes shame on all of us if we go do this again. Those are not religious viewpoints. Those are simply basic hardline geopolitical realities. But and I think this is what I think both of us find interesting and reassuring. Um, God's will, as we understand it from biblical texts, is also turning out right now to probably be the best outcome for everybody who lives. God's will is also the most practical approach, and the approach that's most likely to bring peace. It's quite fascinating.
God created the game. He has a right to make up the rules. So if we play by the rules, we can win. If we try to beat the rules, we can't win because we're cheating the rules, and you never win the game when you do that.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people want to separate faith completely from the entirety of the discussion of the Middle East. If you did that, you still end up, I believe, with a very pragmatic, practical understanding that Israel has a right to exist. It has a right to be a sovereign nation, that it shouldn't be attacked and constantly under threat, all of those things. But I can't look at Israel without looking at it through the lens of faith and say, this nation can only be explained by God's intervening hand. There is no other way to understand this place. I can remember 52 years ago, my first visit here. This was almost a third world country. Its economy was socialist. Its industry was largely selling a few Jaffa oranges and trying to lure some tourists from America to spend some money. Over 52 years, what I've seen is the prophecy come to life. When the prophets of the Old Testament said, the dry bones will live again, I've seen it. When the prophet said that the desert will bloom, I've literally seen it. And therefore, I look at this unbelievable transformation of what people in the secular world call the startup nation. And I say, yeah, you can call it a startup nation, but it started up 3,800 years ago. So it's not like it just got started, but is really hitting its stride. And one thing that is also clear, there are people who say the Jews have no really connection to the land. That's all myth. But every archaeological discovery that has been made in Israel, without exception, Not one archaeological discovery has ever controverted the verse of Scripture. In fact, it has validated the Scripture over and over again, dating back over 3,000 years of archaeology that really validates the veracity of Scripture. That's pretty powerful.
It is, and it's the only place in the world where you can and I think from a perspective of faith, what it does is it takes the great lessons of the Bible and it authenticates them. It brings them back to life. You know, where else can you go and walk the steps of Joshua, walk the steps of Jesus, walk the steps of the prophets, as you've pointed out, you know, where Ezekiel saw his great vision, or Isaiah or Jeremiah, or Samuel, as you pointed out earlier. I mean, it makes these stories real. And in a world where we're so untethered from, you know, authentic values, it matters, I think, tremendously to America that they have the opportunity, Americans have the opportunity to come to Israel and to recharge their batteries and to see this is really, and you did that so many times. You used to bring groups one time after another. You brought groups and they were different people when they left
Yeah.
than when they got there. Every one of them.
Every one of them go back as unpaid ambassadors for Israel. And it's part of the reason I love to bring groups, because people would hear things about Israel. They would hear occupation, West Bank, they would hear apartheid, all these ridiculous things. And I would bring people, and I wouldn't try to indoctrinate them or force them to believe something. I just said, look around, look with your own eyes, ask questions, listen with your own ears, see what you see, hear what you hear, and make your own conclusions. David, I never had to beg people to love Israel. I never had to beg them to believe that Israel had a right to exist. They came to that conclusion by coming here and being here. That's why I say that the best thing that Israel can ever do for itself is to invite people to come and see for themselves and let them just wonder about the country and ask the questions and look around and go home with their own conclusions.
You know, we're right now living in a world in America. You should be glad that you're not living this day to day, but where there is a significant number of Americans, some of whom I won't call them smart, but they're probably high IQ people, you know, did well on their SATs. They truly believe that Israel is engaged in a genocide, which is the most insulting, difficult, horrible thing to hear. And of course, it's leading to real violence. I mean, people getting killed because of it. You're on the ground, and you certainly understand the mindset of the Israeli people, and you see what's going on here. I just for the record, for you know, for a soundbite to play this out, can you just comment on the allegations that Israel is engaged in genocide? I think the more people that can comment on that, the better. So the stage is yours to rebut that allegation.
The fact is, Israel is not committing genocide. Israel is defending itself against a monstrous, evil bunch of uncivilized savages, Hamas. Everything that has happened in Gaza that is negative, whether it's people being hungry or civilians dying, is because Hamas has created an atmosphere in which they move their civilians in front of military targets. Israelis do something that Americans never do. They announce in advance where they're going to strike. They tell people very specifically geographical areas and say, if you're living in this area, and they do it by sending text messages, by blowing out leaflets, by blasting out messages through the internet and every which way, and say, if you're in these areas, get out because we're going to hit these targets. What does Hamas do? They rush civilians to those places and force them to sit there so that they can become victims, because Hamas doesn't care if civilians die. It's just their cost of doing business. There's something that I wish every American fully understood. Frankly, I especially wish that the Brits would understand. When they pretend that somehow any of the civilian deaths, and they're all tragic, but they're because of Hamas. And this past week, I listened with rage when I heard the Brits say that Israel should just end this conflict in Gaza and call it a day and just walk away from it. And I thought, you cowardly hypocrites, you don't know your own history. If in 1944, Winston Churchill had said, you know, this war has gone on a long time and it's really been messy and expensive, so we're just going to call it a draw. And the Nazis can continue to live in Germany and they can run the place. They just have to be nicer, but we're going to let them stay. nobody would have thought Churchill was in his right mind. And today, the Brits might be speaking German. No, they did something different. They bombed Dresden and killed tens of thousands of civilians in order to end the war so there wouldn't be a Nazi government and Nazis wouldn't be remaining in Germany in any form. So when I hear the Brits arrogantly tell Israel how it should prosecute a war and how they ought to just let Hamas survive, it just absolutely enrages me. And I find it to be disgusting and beneath the dignity of the otherwise dignified Brits.
Amen. Amen to that. I'm gonna shift to some to some stuff that's less serious. I want to get your thoughts on what you're enjoying about Israel. I mean, it's not fun to get called up in the middle of the night and deal with various security threats. It's not fun when people start screaming and yelling and getting a hold of you somehow that they lost their passports and what can you do to help me, whatever. I'm sure you've had them, um, but you said it right at the beginning that you're enjoying every minute of this thing. What are you enjoying? What's fun about the job?
Well, Jerusalem is a magnificent city to live in. And I've said many times, probably getting me in trouble back in America, but I said I'd rather live in Jerusalem every day of the week and twice on Sunday than to live in Washington, D.C., a city that I do not enjoy because it's a crazy place.
Yep.
But I also enjoy great food here. I know that may seem simple, but it's very healthy food. Israelis eat lots of fruits and vegetables and good stuff. Janet and I both grew up in the Deep South. One night we were finished dinner and we looked at each other and said, this healthy eating is going to kill us. So, and every now and then, we just think maybe a little Southern comfort food, if we could just find it somewhere, and I'm sure we will. But no, we love the lifestyle. We love being here. We've been so many times. We were talking one night and said, we're used to coming here, be here 2 weeks and go home. We come here 2 weeks, we go home. We're here 2 weeks, we go home. We said this time, after we've been here for 2 weeks, we are home. We're home. This is it. This is where we're supposed to be. And it's a wonderful city. People are hospitable. They're friendly and kind, and um, it's a pleasant place to live. And it's unlike any city in the world. It's so different than most places, uh, but it's a delightful place to be.
You get the feeling as a Baptist minister that this is also a little bit of a calling. You're doing God's work here.
Oh, without a doubt. I've said to so many people, whether it's a Jewish audience or Christian audience, or frankly, I say this to secular audiences. In fact, I say it more emphatically there because they need to hear it, that this is not just a diplomatic assignment. I believe this to be a spiritual assignment. And I look at it as this is where God has appointed us to be at this particular moment of our lives. For how long? I don't know. That's up to God and the president. Because on any given moment, I could read an early morning tweet and find out that he's calling me home. I mean, that's
No,
possible.
no,
But
it's not going to happen. If it didn't happen to me, it's certainly not going to happen to you. Don't worry about it. You'll be there. You'll be there the whole time. You know, um, uh, the one thing that I do miss is when I was ambassador and you were coming in. We used to play a little music together.
yeah,
You're quite the accomplished bass player. I'm not quite as accomplished, but I can strum along.
pretty darn
And
good.
I don't know if you heard this, but I heard that there is a movement underfoot to get us together on stage in October. Have you heard about this at all?
Absolutely. I tell people I will play at the drop of a hat and I will drop
Yeah.
my own hat if nobody asks me to play. So I'm not too good. One of the interesting things I've discovered, even before I got here, was that the Speaker of the Knesset, Amir Ohana, is
Oh, he's
really
great.
a very accomplished guitar player. He and I have had several conversations. We're working on getting together, doing some jam sessions, and playing some gigs, all in the name of bringing peace
Um,
to Israel.
Amir is really, really talented. First of all, he does that lead riff to Hotel California.
Yeah.
Outstanding. He does a great Johnny Be Good.
Yep.
He's really, really good. He's way better than me, but I can play some rhythm, behind him. And
100%.
you remember my old guitar,
Yeah.
the
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 Gibson
Les
Les
Paul?
Paul. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not playing that anymore. But I don't know if you can see it. It's maybe out of the shot. Is it in the shot? It's over there. I got. I pulled out of storage my first electric guitar. It's a Gibson hollow bodied electric ES 330, and
Oh, yeah.
it's like 70 years old, and it plays better than anything else I've ever had. So I'm going to bring that to Israel next time I come,
Oh, man.
and maybe we'll play
The,
that.
the old vintage guitars, and my most valuable guitar is a 1962, so I totally understand it. People who don't play music and they're not guitar people don't realize that an older guitar, first of all, was probably made with a greater level of craftsmanship. The wood that was used in those guitars was much better. They were very careful about what wood they used. They were produced in America by real luthiers, craftsmen who made those things. And the other thing that has happened, the wood has seasoned out, which gives it a warm and resonant tone. A new guitar still has moisture in the wood for years.
Yeah,
And I mean, here we are talking the technical aspects of guitars on a podcast about Israel, but it's still important.
it's
So I'm
important.
just, yeah, it is important to guitar players. But it's one of the reasons that I'm excited you're going to bring that 330 over to Israel because it'll be awesome.
Well, we'll be there. If not earlier, we'll be there in the early fall, and I think there's a concert being planned, and I think both of us are going to get a chance to play there. I want to just kind of conclude by saying this, Mike, because I just like you. I mean, I gave this job everything I had. When I had it for 4 years, put whatever I had, I put into it, and didn't get a whole lot of sleep, but loved every second of it, just like you. But then you walk away like it's very abrupt. You walk away on January 20th, and you walk away and unceremoniously booted out of your house, and you. Fortunately, I had my own home, so I had someplace to go to, but then it was 4 years of an administration that I really did not support. Uh, Ambassadors who were nice guys. I mean, the first one, Tom and I became friends. Tom Nides. The second, Jack was already busy with the war when he started, but um, did not agree with their policies. Did not see them doing the things that I would have done. I'm kind of biting my nails, like I wish coach, get me back in the game. I want to play. I want to get back in. And then you come along, and I just can't tell you how grateful I am that you took this position, how proud I am of the job you're doing, how much I feel that the work that I put into it is not going to be in vain or go to waste, because you're taking it forward to new levels that I only could have wished for. So I just want to thank you on a personal level. We've been friends a long time. Our wives are
Yeah.
friends. We socialize together. It's not like we don't know each other. But just on this podcast, if I can just give you my thanks personally for how you've taken the work I've done and expanded it and grown it in such a beautiful way. And thank you for the comfort and support you're giving the Jewish people, especially the people of Israel who are still in a state of trauma. They need the love, they need the support, they need to know America's with them, and you are delivering that message in a magnificent way. And thanks for
Well,
doing this podcast. I appreciate it very much.
it has been such a thrill. Thank you for the role model that you have been for this position, setting a template that all of us can follow and do well to do so. And, Jonathan, I love you and Tammy, you're dear friends.
Yeah.
We just enjoy being with you. It's fun. And I'm hoping that we'll still be able to get together and enjoy each other's company. But this has been a pleasure getting to be on the podcast and just chatting about things that we both love and care about deeply.
Now, thanks, Mike. God bless you. Stay safe, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you. Take care.